I'm Leslie Parrott, and as many people know, my darling daughter Alison, who was 11 at the time, went missing, and her body was found 2 days later, and she'd been raped and murdered. She'd received a phone call because she was appearing in an upcoming international track meet in the US, and the phone call was asking her to have her picture taken with her team so that she could get some publicity, and I agreed that she could go. She was used to traveling around the city in order to her get some recognition for her accomplishments. So 2 days later, her body, it was found. She had been raped and strangled. Yeah, there was a reward very quickly offered. Certainly people from my industry wanted to post, but then the police also posted a reward. And there was a whole computer system set up to deal with that particular investigation. I think it was something that had come in from the UK, if I'm not mistaken, just because there were so many potential suspects. So at one point, I think there had been 1,000 suspects interviewed and cleared. And the person who was ultimately arrested, Francis Calroy, was one of those suspects, but I guess he provided the appropriate alibis and was cleared at that time. So the investigation was certainly active and ongoing for a long time. And it was always somebody within Toronto Police Force assigned to it, and always somebody that we could communicate and contact with. But, ultimately, I think the case would then have been deemed to be a cold case, that all the leads had been followed up. I always knew in my heart of hearts that the person who would lure and rape and murder an 11-year-old little girl is somebody who had probably committed other crimes and was very likely to recommit crimes. So I had a great sense of sort of personal responsibility that I do what I can do to see that no one else ever be hurt by the person who hurt Alison. That seemed to me to be part of my role as her mother. The case certainly turned into a cold case. I never felt that people would not follow up on anything that ever came in. There may not have been people who were actively working on the case every day. And I guess by those terms, it was determined a cold case. You kind of get to a point of thinking, this may never be solved. And interestingly enough, 10 years to the very day that she went missing was when Toronto Police received back a confirmation of a DNA sample, and it was almost to the absolute time. And then there was an arrest made within the following week. What we discovered was that Roy had had 2 previous convictions, and that in fact he had been released on early parole, and his previous convictions were for people who were slightly older than Alison, but were still young women who had also been lured and had not been murdered, had managed to escape. What we ultimately discovered is that Roy had been convicted of 2 previous sexual assaults. One was a young girl of 14, and one, I think, was a young woman of 19. And he had been serving sentences and had managed to get early release. Ultimately, what we did learn is that the intelligence behind Roy's arrest came from a couple of young cops in Vancouver, I think working in the downtown area, Doug Fall and Mark Wolthers, who through their relationship with people on the street who really got into the underbelly, really just kept being pretty sure and getting some information that Roy should be looked at again. So that kind of relentless police work that will never give up, those are the kind of cops that I believe that Doug and Mark were. And I think I've never had a chance to really say thank you to them. as over the last 24 years, I've got to know a lot of other families who have suffered such losses, who have been victims of just horrendous crimes. It has become really apparent to me that because our family lived in the right place in Toronto, the right neighbourhood, the colour of our skin was right, our education was right, our profession was right, we had just such superb care, support, and respect from everybody throughout the whole system, from the police, certainly into the justice system, from the media. There was always a sense of almost identity, respect, how can we help you? But what I very quickly came to realize, that people who didn't have the same, let's say, fundamental privileges in life as we've been able to enjoy, actually were denied the kind of respect, the kind of help. And that's what continues to drive me to reach out and to try to do everything I can do to perhaps make some systematic changes and to help other people access in themselves, in their own networks and within the system, so that all people truly can get the support to help rebuild their lives, to help them heal. Because unfortunately, as people move through the legal system, they get re-victimized time and time and time again. We are all equal human beings in God's eyes, so why don't we as a society recognize and treat one another?